Hi guys, in this video I'm going to go over the Vlookup function and show you how to use it using some real world data, and also how to use it when you have to account for errors. It's very common when you use Vlookup, you're going to encounter errors and you need to account for that. Before we get started, go to excelvbasql.com and you could watch 30 hours of videos on Excel and VBA. Okay, so let's get started. So in this video series on Excel, I'm going through all the Excel functions, logical functions, mathematical functions, and down here I did a video on the Vlookup function. So if you don't know what the Vlookup function is, go to excelvbasql.com over here and watch this video here. I think it's lesson 6. Just look for this lookup functions, under the Excel library. And you'll see all about the Vlookup function. But I did it on a very small scale here. I just used like 5 rows, and this is a great example of how to use a Vlookup function, but I don't think it gives you a real world example in terms of how to handle errors and things like that. So this video will be a lot shorter than the original one, and hopefully you'll see how to use the Vlookup function with some real world data. So let's keep going. We have some real world data here. Here's our data. We have names, we have streets, city, states. So these are people, right? We have we have a sheet of data full of names of people with their street address, their cities, their zip codes, countries, phone, descriptions, all kinds of stuff. So what we want to do is, let's say you live in Florida, here, the state of Florida, and you want to make a column here. Let's put the column right here. Actually, no, let's put it here for just random reason. Let's insert a column, and let's say you want a column to say is local. Now that's a question, but that's the name of the column. And you want a yes in this column if the person here in this name column lives in Florida. So how would you do that? Well, you would use a Vlookup function. It's a very common way of doing that. So how would you do that? Okay, so let's say that on this Vlookup index max sheet, I'm just going to create a small mapping table. All I'm going to do is do this. I'm just going to put state, and then I'm going to put is local. And then I'm going to put the word yes. This is it. This is my mapping table, right? Now, okay, so let me just highlight that. So what we want to do is do a Vlookup of this value here, this state value, onto this other sheet and this little mapping table here, where I have a state and is local yes, right? Actually, let's make this a little more interesting, because we could actually put a yes here by just doing an if statement, right? So let's pick some other states like SD, OR, AL, WA. Okay, let's do that. SD, OR, AL, WA. Now, why am I doing this? Why am I adding more states? Well, because in the real world, you're going to have a lookup table that's probably more than one row. And why is that? Well, because you could have solved this with a simple if statement. But when you have 5 states or 7 states, then you have to write a humongous OR statement. If you don't know what I'm talking about with an OR statement, go watch the video I put up on the OR statement, the OR function. You'd have to say if the state is Illinois, or it's San Diego, or it's South Dakota, or it's Oregon, or it's Alaska, or it's Nebraska. Your function would be very, very long. It would take a lot of time to write it. Let's also add another couple states here, OH and IL. Okay, so if you did this with an OR statement, if you tried to identify all the states in that column, your OR statement would have to account for all these states. You'd have to write an OR sorry, I keep saying statement, but it's a function. You write an OR function that would have 7 elements in it. You'd say, is that value Florida or South Dakota or Oregon? You get my point, right? So it's much easier to just do a lookup onto that table and return yes, right? Okay, so let's do that. So now we could write our VLOOKUP. So if you don't, like I said, if you don't know what a VLOOKUP is, go watch the first video. So here I'm going to do VLOOKUP. I want to look up this value state. I want to look it up. You know, it says what table do you want to look up in? Well, I select the sheet. I go over here. I highlight this table, right? And then I put a comma. It says what column do you want to return? I want to return this second column that has the yes in it. And what kind of match? This is where I believe it gets confusing in the VLOOKUPs, and I explained this in the other video. But we want to do an exact match here. So I'm going to put 0, and I'm going to just hit enter. So this is all we're going to need to write to look up onto that table this value. Now we get a pound NA here. So why did we get pound NA? Well, that's because Idaho ID is not in this table. You see that, right? Because we did an exact match, it's saying look up ID in this table, and it tries to find it in this column, and it doesn't find it, so it returns a pound NA. So we have to handle that, and this is what I wanted to talk about when you have to handle errors using VLOOKUP, because this happens all the time. This right here, you get a pound NA, but you don't want a pound NA. You just want it. You want it to say blank, or you want it to say something else. So we could do that. And how do we do that? Well, all you have to do is write an if statement that says if this is error. So all we're saying is that if that VLOOKUP returns an error, then I just want to put blank. Else, I'm just going to copy what I just wrote. And I'm just going to put it here again, and then close it off. So remember how if statements work. They do a criteria, a logical test, and it's a true or false. And if the value is true, it's going to return that, which is going to be blank. So what is our test here? Our test is, does the VLOOKUP return an error? And if it does, it's going to return blank. And if it doesn't, it's going to return the VLOOKUP. Right here, right? I just did the VLOOKUP again. So let me hit enter here, and now I get blank here. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now you might think this is very long and complex, but it really isn't, right? All I did was write this VLOOKUP function and then wrap an if statement around it. And this here is the same VLOOKUP function, right? So the only thing I'm doing is saying if that VLOOKUP is an error, and how do I test if it's an error? I just wrap this is error function around it. If it is an error, then it's going to return blank, and if it's not, it's going to do the VLOOKUP. So now I could just drag this down, but I'm going to just double click the lower right corner, and there you see I get a yes for Illinois. I get let's see, oh, so I didn't get any other yeses here. Now why is that? Very common error, and this is good that you see this. It's because if I look in this function, you see this VLOOKUP index match. It's looking on this sheet, VLOOKUP index match in range K3 to L10. But the very first one is K1 to L8. So if I go over here, what is this? This is going to be K2 to L8. So that's the range, and we need to sort of lock that down. So the problem we're having is that we need to make this an absolute reference. So I'm just going to do that here by putting the dollar signs, and also over here put the dollar signs in here, hit enter. Now when I double click this, I get the correct answer that I want. I get yeses for all. So for all the states in this column that are in this mapping table, I get a value here, the value I want, which is this value, the yes, right? So that is how you would use VLOOKUP in the real world to account for times that you're going to get the pound NA, the error. You just wrap this isError function around it, and then that's going to return a true or false. And if it's true, you use the if statement, the if function, I'm sorry, that will allow you to catch that error. It says if it is true that I get an error, I want to return blank. Now you could return anything here. So you could put, if I want to write no, like we saw before, I could just put no here. So now I have is local yes no instead of yes and blank. So you get the idea. To account for errors, make sure that you use this isError function with your VLOOKUP. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to show you. Other thing I wanted to show you is now that you've identified people that are local because you're traveling, let's say you travel through those states, right? Now your boss or whoever comes to you and says, you want to talk about the tax rate. So someone, if they have a tax rate between 0 and 25, you want to have them have a low tax rate. This is a tax type, right? So I'm talking about this column here. Someone is coming to you and saying, look at this income tax rate. You see how they're all different, 25, 35, 40, 50, 10. They want to sort of make it easier to digest. So let's insert a column here called tax type. And what we want to do is look up this income tax rate, and we want to break it down into 3 categories: a low tax bracket, a medium tax bracket, and a high tax bracket. So we're going to do that here using the VLOOKUP function. But now we're going to do an approximate match instead of a exact match. Okay, so we have to set up our mapping table like this. This is our mapping table for our approximate match. We have 3 tax types: low tax, medium tax, and high tax. And we want them to go from 0 to 24, we want that to be low tax. From 24 to 49 be medium tax, and above that you want it to be high tax. Now why are these like this? Because really what I want is 0 to 20. I want a 25% tax rate to be a medium. But because of this, the way the approximate match works, oh, actually, this should be 25, and this should be 50. Yeah, that'll be fine. And actually, this has to be percentages. The way the approximate match works is that you need to order these from low to high when you use a VLOOKUP. So let's try this. We want this to say medium tax bracket right here. So let's try that. We're going to do a VLOOKUP of that value, M6, which is 25%, onto what? Onto this table over here, right? I'm going to lock it down by using the absolute references. And now here's the critical part. What column do you want? Well, I want the second column, which is going to return this text of low tax, medium tax, high tax. And then I want an approximate match, which is the value 1. Remember, 1 stands for true, 0 stands for false. If I hit enter here, I get medium tax. If I drag this down, I get, let's test this out by putting a filter on this data so we can see. So I highlight that row and I go over here and I'm just going to put filter. So now I can, it's very easy for me to see what is going to be in this tax rate. So let's select everything that is beneath 25%. And then sure enough, that gives me a tax type of low. Let's select things with 25 to 35 and 40, and I get a medium tax bracket, which is what we want. So that's working. Now let's select all here. Let me go in here, and I'm just going to change this person's tax rate from 35 to 50 and see what happens. So I get a high tax tax type. If I put in 900, I get high tax. If I put in 1000, I get a high tax. If I put in, let's say, 27, I get a medium tax, right? If I put in a 24.999, I get a low tax. You see how that works? So the approximate match is looking up this value, and it's looking for it's taking this value and it's looking in this table and going look for 24.999 in this column, and if you don't find it, look for a value that's lower than it. Look for the first value that's lower than it. So it goes in here, it says 24.999. Is that here? No, it's not, because it's not 25. You know, they're off by 0.0001. So it's going to look for the first value that's lower, and that happens to be 0. It finds 0, and then it returns the second column here. So it says low tax there. So 24.999 says low tax. So that's how the approximate match is working. You have to order this column from low to high, and then whatever value you're looking up in this table, it's going to look for it. If it doesn't find it, it's going to then look for the first lowest number. So let's say, just to show you that, if I pass in a -1%, I'm going to get an error, because it cannot find anything lower than -1. It takes -1% and it goes to this table here and it looks in this column and says it's -1% here, and it says no, and then it's able to, using the approximate match, it says okay, look for something lower than it, and there's nothing lower than it. So it returns an error. Now if I put in 0 here, it's going to find the 0 in that table. It's going to go here, it's going to look for 0. Well, it finds it, so it returns low tax. So that's how the approximate match works with some real data here. Notice that if you pass in anything higher than 50%, it's going to look in that table. So let's say this 1,000, right? It takes 1,000, looks in this column and says, is 1,000 in here? No. Okay. So is there a number lower than it? I'm going to take the first. It's going to grab the first one. So it goes in here, and yes, there is a number lower than it, 50%. It goes here, and then it grabs the second column. And why the second column? Because we specify that here in the VLOOKUP, this second column here, right? I could actually put the first column here if I wanted, and I could paste that down, and you could see that when you put in 1,000%, it really is looking in, it finds that first column of 50%, because that's the first lowest number. If you put in 40, there's no 40 in the table, but it'll find 25%. So let's put this back to the second column. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show in this video. I think this is a good video to actually see how people use VLOOKUP in the real world. They do things like this all the time. You put an isError function around your VLOOKUP to handle the case when you look up in a table using the exact match. That's the big thing about the error, is that it often happens, like 99% of the time, you're going to be using the exact match, this (0), and when you don't have a value in your mapping table, you're going to get an error. So you need to handle that with this isError function, and then you put an if function around that. So that's how you would do that with the isError. And then if you ever need to use the approximate match, like we did over here, that's how you would do it again, is just make sure that your table over here that you're looking up in is ordered from low to high, and you'll be fine. and just know that it looks for this value in that column, the first column. If it doesn't find it, it looks for a number lower than it, and that's how it finds the match. So let me take this filter off real quick. So that's all I wanted to show in this video. Remember, VLOOKUP it's probably the most important, or one of the most important functions in Excel. So you need to know it, and you need to know it really good if you're going to be good at Excel. If you want to sort of have that fluidity with Excel skills that you often need in jobs and things like that. So this whole workbook is very good because it goes over tons of Excel functions. I'm going to upload it to the website Excel VBA SQL, where you can download it. If you have any questions, just email me here on the contact page, or you can click this icon here if I'm not online. And that's it for this video. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.